Okay, well, again, in England, Joyce gets involved with a group trying to make a commune based on the ideas of the diggers, Gerard Winstanley, 18th century, the first socialists, and that's a whole story in itself which I can't possibly tell you. But while all that's happening, and there's a lot in that, a lot of the book is concerned with that. In fact, that's his salvation. In that, Danny finds a vision of utopia that he can fit in with, that has a place for both him and Joyce. And it needs engineering. It's based on the notion of self-sufficiency and no money, free acquisition economy. And he knows he can be, have a big role to play in this. And so he gets really excited about that. But of course he still has the Faustian bargain with Big Jim and the IRA. And the rest of the book really is concerned with his escaping from that dilemma. But I haven't time to go through all that. So what I'm going to do is, okay, Joyce is in England at the Hammond School, and with her blessing he enters into what turns out to be a really disastrous relationship with somebody named Sheila in Belfast. She is an MP's daughter. Her father has been shot at a public meeting and may have to spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. And needless to say, Sheila is very enraged about this, to put it mildly, and she decides, to hell with nationalism, she's going to join the IRA, which she does, against Danny's advice. And she's also young, much the same age as Danny, 15, 16-ish. And they decide to make her a bomb courier, because who could be less threatening than a teenage girl? And they put her on a bike to deliver her bombs. And so I'm just going to read you one chapter, and this is concerned with Sheila. We're back in Belfast. I said it gets darker in the second half. This is pretty dark. I have to come in with more light. With a pounding heart and a light feeling in her head, Sheila pedalled slowly, the unaccustomed weight in the right-hand pannier, giving the bicycle a list to that side and making it difficult to steer. Inconspicuously dressed, she willed herself to be invisible as she cruised down the narrow gap between the pavement and the long line of cars that had unaccountably stopped along North Street, just ahead of the junction with Royal Avenue. Drawing nearer the source of the delay, she saw that there was also a line of queued-up pedestrians on the pavement, and that the cause of both hold-ups was the presence of 4 military jeeps, which were parked nose to tail across the road, and forming a narrow tunnel through which vehicles were being allowed to pass, one at a time, after perfunctory search by members of the little group of rifle-bearing soldiers manning the roadblock. This was something new. RUC checkpoints set up outside shopping centres and public buildings where pedestrians' pockets and bags were checked. But that had the feel of a half-hearted operation intended as window dressing to make the public think that something was being done. Sheila hadn't seen soldiers involved before, or anything as obviously serious as this. She watched them. Sorry. That's funny. It looks like a fault in the printing. Oh no, I'm not. I'm crazy. She watched them frisk middle-aged women with shopping baskets and sullen dockyard workers with lunch boxes on their way to the evening shift at Donegal Quay, while children pulled at their parents' clothing and complained that they wanted to get to the shops. With a couple of 100 yards still to go to the back end of the queue, she applied the brakes and drew to a gentle halt. Obviously, there would have to be a change of plan. She glanced anxiously at her wristwatch to see exactly how many minutes she had in which to come up with a new plan. Why hadn't anybody told her what to do in this situation? Why hadn't they given her any instructions about how to abort the operation if it became necessary? Sweating now, she stood motionless for a few moments, still holding the handlebars but with her feet on the ground, trying to come up with a viable plan B. She could take the bicycle and dump it with its deadly pannier in the River Lagan. That might kill a few fish, but humans would be at no serious risk. Yes, that would have to be it. She lifted the front of the bike and started to turn it around. "Hey, you there, young lady?" It was a distinctly English accent and was coming from close behind her. "Where do you think you're going then?" She lowered the front wheel back onto the road and turned round. There was a young British soldier in helmet and full battle gear approaching rapidly. I'm turning back. I don't have time to go through all that. She could hear a quiver in her voice and hoped that the soldier hadn't picked it up. He leered down at her, his thoughts clearly ranging over more than just his military duties. Ain't you? That's too bad, because we've got lots of time, and our orders are to search everybody in this part of North Street, not just the ones that wants to be searched. So I suggest you park that there bike over there, he pointed to the wall of a nearby shop, and let me have a look at that shoulder bag of yours. My shoulder bag? Sheila had completely forgotten that she was wearing it. She neatly wheeled the bicycle onto the pavement, leaned it carefully against the wall, and returned, offering the soldier her bag and breathing a little easier. He took it from her roughly and rifled through it with enthusiasm, tossing a rolled up plastic Mac onto the pavement, ignoring her colourful cloth purse with its brass clasp, and fixing his attention instead on a bunch of old crumpled election pamphlets right at the bottom. What we got here then? He opened one of the leaflets and read it slowly, his lips flickering with the shadows of the words. A smile spread across his face. Just old pamphlets. My father was a candidate in the local council elections a few months ago. This here's subversive literature, miss. Going to have to take you in for questioning. Subversive literature? What are you talking about? They're election pamphlets. My father's a Stormont MP. He's also on the local council. These are... I've just told you what these are. Now shut up while I make a call. He unhitched a field two-way radio from his shoulder strap and spoke into it. Kilo 72 to Kilo 1, I'm on North Street, just opposite Church Street. I've apprehended a female with anti-government literature on her person. Request female officer to collect her and take her to the interrogation centre. Over. The machine barked back. The voice was too distorted to make any sense to Sheila. You stay put, miss. Somebody will be here to talk to you in a few minutes. But this is ridiculous. Those aren't anti-government literature. My dad is in the government, the Stormont one. He's a nationalist MP. It's a perfectly normal, respectable political party. Is that so? Well, he held the pamphlet up to read it again. It says here, we look forward to the day when this country will sever all ties with the United Kingdom and become part of a new Republic of all Ireland. That's called republicanism, that is, as in Irish Republican Army. I ain't thick, you know. We have nothing to do with the Irish Republican Army. We're an ordinary constitutional political party. Sweetheart, I ain't interested in arguing the toss with you. I've got a job to do and I'm doing it. Now stand over by your bike and wait. I ain't asking, I'm telling. For what seemed an eternity, Sheila waited by the bicycle while the soldier seemed to lose interest and started to watch the queue growing ever longer further down the road by the improvised roadblock. He received another unintelligible message on his radio and replied. More minutes ticked by. Sheila wiped the sweat from her forehead and looked at her watch. I need to go home. I need to go to the bathroom. She tried to move off, but the soldier grabbed her wrist. You ain't listening, are you, sweetheart? He raised her arm behind her and lifted it just enough to hurt. Now you'd better learn to do what you're told or you'll be in worse trouble than you are already. Still holding on to her, sorry, light's difficult here. Still holding on to her, he reached for the switch on his radio with his free hand and spoke into the microphone without taking it off its strap. Kilo 72 to Kilo 20, you there, Nige? The device squawked back. I'm just opposite Church Street. Got this little Irish bitch here with the IRA pamphlets in her bag. Doesn't know how to behave. Can you come and give me a hand with her? Kilo 1 sending somebody to take her in, over. A further squawk which seemed to end in a laugh. She's a cheeky little bit of blonde jailbait, just your type, you love her. Another amused squawk. Yeah, fuck you too. Out. He switched off the machine and loosened his grip on Sheila's arm. Must be your lucky day, you're going to meet my pal Nige. He's got a soft spot for kids like you. Well, soft, but sometimes it goes a bit hard. He laughed loudly at his own joke. In the distance, Sheila saw one of the soldiers leave the group at the roadblock and start to walk slowly in her direction. He was tall and walked with his head back in a swagger that suggested arrogance and cruelty. Sheila's thoughts raced. She looked at her watch again. You can stop doing that, sweetheart. You ain't going nowhere. Not for the moment, anyway. Relax. A few questions, Maybe we'll check if there's a gun hidden up your little pink pussy. You'd like that, wouldn't you? Then you can go, I do it right here, only my sergeant won't let me. Again, he found his own joke highly amusing. The second soldier walked right up to them without hurrying and looked her in the eye. His lips curled into an unpleasant grin. Need a bit of help to keep her from running off, do you, Ed? Don't blame you, kid. I'd want to get away from that smelly bugger too. She realised that the first soldier's hand was now on her breast and pulled it aside. Oops, sorry miss, my hand slipped. Maybe you can help me to keep this dangerous prisoner under control, Nige. Oh yeah, I can help, Ed, I'm good at that. He reached towards her and she pressed back into Ed's chest. Maybe I'm wrong, Ed, maybe she likes you after all, is that right? You fancy Ed here, do you? Pretty weird taste, I'd call that. Sheila spoke in a voice that had risen in register and become mixed with tears. Her tone was now one of desperation. Please listen to me. You're in terrible danger, we all are. Listen, there's almost no time left. You have to believe me. We have to get away from here right now. In God's name, we've got to start running, please. I beg you, in God's name. The two men looked at each other and laughed. Ed was the first to find his voice. In danger, are we? Is that so? What's that? Some kind of threat? You got to stick a dynamite up your jacksie, maybe? Sheila's words sounded so ridiculous even to herself that she could barely get them out. My bicycle is going to explode. Your bicycle's going to explode. Did you hear that, Nige? Your bicycle's going to explode. Bugger me, that's the funniest thing I've heard since I came to Ireland. Nigel and Ed looked at one another and doubled up with laughter. In a desperate attempt to take advantage of their loss of concentration, Sheila kicked Ed as hard as she could on the shin and managed to escape his grip. But before she could take more than a single stride, the powerful right arm of the still laughing Nigel was around her waist, dragging her backwards as she pummeled his ribs with his elbows. Then there was nothingness. At the end of that chapter.